What is imposter syndrome? The Oxford Dictionary defines it as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Symptoms: persistent self-doubt, fear of failure, perfectionism, fear of judgment or criticism, attributing success to external factors, constantly seeking reassurance and external validation. If you're listening and you feel familiar with the symptoms, I hear you. I've been there. I am there. But I'm no longer paralyzed by it. So that's an advancement, right? See what I did there? Looking for validation, looking for a permission slip that makes me feel like I'm allowed to talk about this and share my experiences. The mere fact that this recording exists is proof that I gave myself permission. Hi, and welcome to the Thinking Round. I'm your host, Ivelisse del Carmen, singer-songwriter. You can find a link to my music below. But first, and before anything else, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like this content, because this will only get better with time. Today, I'll be talking about my experience with imposter syndrome and how I've managed to push forward in the last few years. For this episode, I'll be quoting the following books which have served as guides for me: The War of Art by Steven Pressfield and Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Disclaimer: the expressions made here are 100% my own and come from my own experiences. I'm not a therapist, nor do I claim to be. And I'm not an authority on the subject. I'm just sharing my personal experience in the hope that it can help someone else along the way. So, let's get started. Step 1. The brick wall. I've struggled with imposter syndrome for decades, but I only learned about it 2 years ago in a uni class about the creative process. It is also through this course that I found the 2 books I can confidently attribute to some of the positive changes I've made in my life. Changes that have led me to be more open to possibility, takes risks, and find purpose. These 2 books were like chapter 1 of my journey, and I'm now like on chapter 8. Let me tell you, you just need to start somewhere, right? For the past 2 years, I've been working on my traumas, my fears, etc. The first step: acknowledge your fears. I find imposter syndrome to be part of what Steven Pressfield calls resistance. He says, quote, "Resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. Resistance is the most toxic force on the planet. Resistance arises from within. It is self-generated and self-perpetuated. Resistance is the enemy within. For me, resistance stopped me. It kept me away from doing what I wanted to do for over a decade. Remember the imposter syndrome symptoms: persistent self-doubt, fear of failure, perfectionism, fear of judgment, attributing success to external factors. Well, I had every symptom. For the first time, I experienced how it felt to meet every single requirement for something and even excel at each of them. My first bold move was to apply for a master's in songwriting program, which I was 200% sure I wouldn't be accepted into. But guess what? I did. The first course, Creative Process, well, I cried at every single session. I can now explain what was happening to me. I was opening up. I allowed myself to be vulnerable. I couldn't believe I was there because I felt I wasn't good enough. Then I learned I wasn't the only one feeling like this. Confronting resistance for me felt like trying to knock a 10-inch thick brick wall with my bare hands. That wall wasn't coming down. Pressfield says, what finally convinced me to go ahead was simply that I was so unhappy not going ahead. I was developing symptoms. As soon as I sat down and began, I was okay. So I followed his advice. I started writing and singing again. Not because I thought it was any good, but because it brought me comfort. And first, it was just comfort, not joy, because I still thought I would fail. But it felt soothing, like a break for my knuckles after punching that brick wall for so long. So, first step, acknowledge your accomplishments. Don't think, act. We can always revise and revisit once we've acted, but we can accomplish nothing until we act. Pressfield. I acknowledge that I got into the songwriting program on my own merits. I attended every single session, even though it was emotionally draining. I chose to put myself ahead of my fears and resistance, and it has paid off. I chose to be brave. I realized I needed emotional support, and instead of hating myself for it, I offered to myself the kindness I would give anyone else. These were my achievements, a slow process, but we're not looking for productivity here. We're working towards building a life of purpose and possibility. Suggestion 1, acknowledge your achievements. Step 2, is there another way? Pressfield says, quote, how many pages have I produced? I don't care. Are they any good? I don't even think about it. All that matters is that I've put the time and hit it with all I've got. All that counts is that for this day, for this session, I have overcome resistance. End quote. Have you ever found yourself thinking, I wish I could make that. I wish I had that relationship. This isn't good enough. I need more singing lessons. My voice isn't right. I used to compare myself all the time to the people I respected and idolized in my industry. I can confidently say I had a museum inside my head with no paintings, just pedestals. It's good to admire and respect people who inspire you. But let me tell you a little discovery I've made. The only one running this race is you. Your life race. You compete against yourself. Failures make you grow stronger, build stamina. Achievements are your water breaks. Comparing yourself to others is like leaving the race and sitting in the bleachers to watch an empty track. Elizabeth Gilbert says in Big Magic, quote, what keeps you from creative living is often your self-absorption, self-doubt, judgment, your self-disgust, and your crushing sense of protection. End quote. I'd like to add comparison to that list. One thing that helps is awareness. When you start doubting yourself, comparing yourself to others, as soon as you become conscious of what you're doing, stop and think of something you have recently accomplished. Everything counts. Everything. I didn't run out of toilet paper this week. Win, win, win. Made plans and didn't cancel. Win. Introduce yourself to someone new. Win. If we go back to my resistance wall, doing this made me stop punching the wall and look up instead of only forward. That's when I noticed that the wall was thick, but not high. Suggestion 2, measure your own achievements instead of comparing themselves to others. Step 3, jump. Elizabeth Gilbert says, perfection stops people from completing their work, and worse, it often stops people from beginning their work. End of quote. Perfectionism is a high-end haute couture version of fear. Perfectionism is nothing more than a deep existential angst that says again and again, I'm not good enough and I will never be good enough. End of quote. Perfectionism is a form of resistance. And how do you get over it? You jump. That brick wall is thick, but it's not high. Just do your best Spider-Man impression and go for it. Perfection doesn't exist. Or maybe it does, but it's only in our heads. And since everyone has a different head, literally, that means that there are endless variations of perfection. No two people define it exactly the same way. I'm no expert, but it's probably easier to find someone with the same name as you, or even the same face, than someone who shares your exact definition of perfection. We all measure emotions, experiences, and culture differently. Perfection is a cultural thing. Maybe I'll do an episode on that. That's actually quite interesting. Okay, let's continue. Elizabeth Gilbert says, quote, at some point you really have to finish and release it as it is, if only so that you can go on to make other things with a glad and determined heart, which is the entire point, or it should be. End of quote. Do it! The next. Have you heard the saying, practice makes perfect? Ask yourself, perfect for who? Does practice make it better? It certainly makes it different. After practicing it on a song 500 times, the sound is different. I might prefer version number 90. You might prefer version number 250. But version number 500, it might just sound over rehearsed and like everyone else. Is that perfection? I'll leave that up to you. Of course, if you're a surgeon, a doctor, for example, you have to practice until you can actually open someone up and close them back up. So let me clarify. I'm talking about creative process, about art, about self-expression. So make, release, next. Now, my third suggestion, remind yourself that no one is perfect and that a person can only do their best, their personal best. Step 4, doors. After figuring out how to leave that brick wall behind me, I found myself in front of another one, and another one, and another one. Resistance and fear don't go away. They will always be there. But some brick walls have doors. You just have to acknowledge them, open them, and walk through. That's what it feels like when you start learning how to work with your fears. You stop jumping and doing all kinds of acrobatics just to get across. Elizabeth Gilbert says, quote, make space for fear and give it a voice, but do not give it a vote. You and your creativity are the ones allowed to make decisions. This is really important because if you are not comfortable living in fear, you'll never do anything interesting. End of quote. Fear of failure, fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged. One thing I've learned about myself is that sometimes when I've been judgmental of others, I was actually denying myself the possibility of exploring or experiencing what they were experiencing. For example, I used to roll my eyes at singers who needed to look at lyrics during a performance. For context, I come from a classical opera background where memorization is required. I made the mistake of thinking this was the only way to perform. What did that mean for me? It meant I wouldn't allow myself to perform songs I hadn't memorized. It meant fewer performances. It meant less flexibility to adapt to different audiences. If I didn't have the song memorized, I would not sing it. And let's not even talk about the anxiety I experienced when I forgot lyrics because I was exhausted singing up a late night gig after a full day of hustling in the city. I made a mistake and I learned my lesson. I now, too, have my lyrics on stage. I've learned not to judge. I've learned that memorizing your music doesn't make you any better. I've learned to share my experiences without fear and judgment. I've learned that perfection is whatever I want it to be. And sometimes it can be crap, and that's okay. So my fourth suggestion, make mistakes. It's the only way you'll grow. And last but not least, step 5, mirror on the wall. Elizabeth Gilbert says, quote, when you grow curious about things, pursue them. Don't ask for permission. Live life however you want. You won't be able to create anything interesting in your life if you don't believe that you're entitled to at least try. This doesn't mean behaving like a princess or acting as though the world owes you anything whatsoever. Creative entitlement means believing that you're allowed to be here, and that merely by being here, you're allowed to have a voice and a vision of your own. I still struggle with this one. I keep forgetting that I don't need to raise my hand in class if I need to use to do. I can just stand up and go. In fact, I can leave the room if I want to. I don't even need an excuse. This is a true story. I hold my pee, hold my anxiety, sit there until I'm about to explode, and then I remember I don't need permission. I can give it to myself. I'm still working on this. Constant need for reassurance and validation. My walls of resistance always included a validation box where I would constantly be on the lookout for approval letters. This one is a work in progress, but I've made advancements. For example, I no longer talk about my projects unless they're complete. Or, of course, I work with people to bring these projects to life, but that's a different dynamic. I don't seek approval, I seek collaboration. Second, I have mentors who don't tell me what to do, but are there for guidance and networking when I ask for help. They offer feedback and advice. And I no longer ask every single person I bump into what they think about this or that song I wrote. I can't believe I used to do that. There's step one, acknowledge your accomplishments. So I pat myself on the shoulder more often now. I make my own decisions, like living a place where I no longer feeling comfortable. And I own my mistakes. I look at myself in the mirror and smile. Good job. You're moving forward. So last but not least, my fifth suggestion. Remove the validation box from the wall. Replace it with a mirror. And that, my friends, wraps up today's episode. I truly hope you found something valuable to reflect on, something that resonates with you, and perhaps even something that helps you along your journey. Remember, growth isn't about perfection. It's about progress, persistence, and self-compassion. If you enjoyed this episode, I love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to post your questions or comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that button now for more content like this. Until next time, keep growing, keep challenging yourself, and most importantly, keep thinking. Bye.